As someone of you probably knows, Bioma is a framework designed for developing, parameterizing, and running modeling solutions in the domains of agriculture and environment. It is based on discrete conceptual units codified in extensible software components. And this solution makes available alternate approaches for the simulation of different processes within the biophysical domain. It allows massive reuse of modeling approaches. It facilitates the development of new modeling solutions, and we will see what a modeling solution is, also from the extension and hybridization of the existing ones. And then it assures the highest transparency of modeling solutions. This is quite a technicality, but this is most important. It theoretically encourages third parties to participate to the development of components for the specific processes they are expert in, because they benefit from a variety of components already available. And this is what we are trying to do. So, again, the goal of this framework is to rapidly bridge from prototypes to operational application, enabling running and comparing these modeling solutions. Modeling solutions are these objects you can see in the blue box. They are aggregation and combination of different models made for the simulation and the description of different systems. For example, we can have a composition of model for simulating crops, or just crops, or the cropping system, or the interaction of the crops with pests and diseases, and so on. The simulation system is discretized in layer. This is, again, quite a technicality, maybe not so simple to understand, but it is important in terms of usability and reusability of what we develop. Such layers are the model layer, where fine-grained models are implemented in discrete units. Then we have the composition layer, where the simple models are composed in more complex aggregated models. These are the modeling solution, what we call modeling solutions. Then we have the configuration layer made for the development of adapters for advanced functionalities. And then we have a number of applications which can be linked to each of the layers. And in the simplest case, they are simple console applications, but there are also advanced implementation like Bioma Spatial or Bioma Side. For example, Bioma Spatial is an application which allows to run modeling solution against spatial explicit units, like, for example, polygons or grid cells. And this is the application we use for forecasting purposes. And then we have a number of development tools, mostly used for code generation and for simplifying the life of people who develop these kind of models and solutions. So within Bioma, applications, as I told you, can be linked to each of these layers. For example, in the simplest case, to the model layer or composition layer, but they can also be linked to the configuration layer. And these layers do not implement any top-down dependency, hence facilitating the reuse of code, of components, of the utilities and tools you develop. This is true within different applications, but also within different frameworks. We suggest to use Bioma. It is just a suggestion. We do not want to force anybody to use our framework, but we are focused on the development of components which are framework independent. So what I develop can be used by you, and the same if we decide we can manage to make also the contrary. And here I highlighted three main components: crop ML, diseases, and abiotic damages, because these are the components which make up most of the modeling solutions we use, and I will show you for yield forecasting purposes. So the first one is CropML, Crop Model Library. CropML is a model library implementing different approaches for the simulation of crop growth and development. The implemented approaches make up different generic models like Wofost, CropSys, or Sticks, and some specific crop models like WARM, the model we use for the simulation of rice, of the rice cropping system, and cane growth, specific for sugarcane simulation. The software design promotes ensemble model simulation, the incorporation of new modeling approaches from research, and model hybridization, as I told you before. So the algorithms are implemented as simple and composite model units that we call the strategy, following the strategy pattern. More specifically, a simple strategy is an indivisible unit of algorithm, of code, representing a sub-process, or the simplest unit of algorithm for which alternate approaches exist or could exist. Simple strategies, this one, for example, or these, and so on, are composed into objects of increasing complexity, composite strategies, which are in turn subject to composition and give rise to the crop model, for example, in these cases. So each crop model describes each process of interest with specific modeling approaches. And this means within CropML that each crop model is made up by different or alternative strategies. These are, for example, the strategy used by WARM for the simulation of rice, by CropSys, and Wofost. And this architecture allows to extend the component, and so possibly each crop model, with the addition of new strategies. And these strategies can be reused for the formalization of new crop models. I'm sorry. So let's go to another component, the one we use for simulating the diseases, plant diseases. And in this case, despite their key role in determining actual production levels, the impact of diseases on the year-to-year yield fluctuation is ignored in most of the yield forecasting systems. A number of models has been developed for a number of plant diseases, but the coupling of disease forecasting models to crop growth model is not yet operational. And it is crucial to deal with the implementation of models for the simulation of the dynamics of plant diseases and for plant pathogen interaction, aiming at quantifying biotic yield losses. And for this reason, we developed a component named diseases simply, targeted at simulating a generic fungal pathogen, considering the impact of weather variables, agricultural management, and host characteristic. Within Bioma, this component diseases can be easily coupled to other components simulating different aspects of the agroenvironment, for example, CropML, agro-management, and so on. So the coupling of this component with another component gives rise to a modeling solution simulating the system, crop, and pathogen. So diseases is made up of 4 software libraries, providing a generic frame for simulating the disease development. And this library are disease progress, inoculum pressure, impacts on plant, and agro-management impact. And again, each component is developed as generic model unit to simulate various aspects of the epidemics. So let's have a look to a scheme, a flow chart of the component diseases. And we have the 4 libraries: inoculum pressure, disease progress, agro-management diseases, and impact on plants. I'm sorry. The first one, inoculum pressure, evaluates the initial condition for the development of the epidemic, and so the initial disease severity. Then we have disease progress, which evaluates the progress of the epidemic of a fungal pathogen with an hourly time step, and it calculates the incubation, latency, infectiousness, then the production of spores and the dispersal of these spores. And these processes are strongly dependent to weather variables and to biological significant parameters which are specific for each couple, disease, host, and the pathogen. Then we have the library agromanagement disease, which provides approaches for simulating the effect of agrochemicals, for example, on the disease progress, and then also the degradation of these agrochemicals. Finally, we have impact on plants, which is the component, which is actually the interfacing between the disease component and the crop model, because it provides a number of approaches for quantifying yield losses and a broad range of options. And we will see in the following slides how. So, just to have an overview on how this component disease progress works, let's start from an healthy tissue, an healthy leaf, an healthy leaf area index in this case, that under particular conditions of temperature, leaf wetness, and depending on the parameter cultivar resistance for a specific disease, can be infected. At this point, the healthy tissues becomes first latent, and after a period of incubation, the symptoms become visible. So after this period of latency, the tissue becomes infectious, and this means that the pathogen can sporulate, produce spore, and these spores, depending on weather condition, can be dispersed and caught by other healthy tissues, and this gives rise to secondary infections. After the infectious period, the tissues become old and no more active. And during this latency and infectious period, the dependency of the processes to temperature are described by a simple beta function, which is parameterized by 3 parameters: the cardinal temperature of the development of the disease, which can be different for each one of these processes. Then we have the library impacts on plants, which provides a broad range of options for calculating the effect of a disease on the plant characteristics, on the plant physiology, and on the yield. It can simulate generic damages, like, for example, those produced to leaf area index, to the photosynthetic surfaces, but also disease-specific damages, like, for example, the reduction of the partitioning of the photosynthase to the storage organs. And it can be linked to a number of crop models, for example, crop models based on CO2 assimilation, like in the case of WOFOS, or also crop models based on radiation use efficiency, like worm and crop cyst. And these are the 3 models we have already seen within CropML, for example. And all of these models produce a key synthetic variable, the leaf area index, which can be affected by a disease, and the dynamics are simulated by the component disease progress. And in this case, part of this leaf area index can lose functionality. At this point, the component impacts on plant can calculate directly a yield loss function basing on the tissue affected, or can update iteratively the variables within crop ML, for example, the state variables of the model, leaf area index. So it updates the value of green leaf area index as reduced by the impact of the pathogen, or a new radiation use efficiency, and so on. So here we have the results of some sample simulations performed with 2 different modeling solutions. The first one is composed by the crop model WAR for rice, and the component diseases parameterized for simulating the blast disease of rice. And the second one with WOFOS simulating wheat, and diseases simulating brown rust. Here we have the first, the outputs of the first modeling solution on this column, and the second one on this one. And here we have the results of the outputs of the component inoculum pressure, which calculates the disease onset as a function of initial conditions and meteorological variables. And then we have disease progress, which calculates dynamically the percentage of host tissue affected by considering the different phases of epidemic development. And here we can see the different states of the tissue, the percentage of the tissue affected, vulnerable, or I can't read. Then the component impacts on plant that basing on the percentage of host tissue affected by the disease can calculate the impact, for example, on light interception. This is a generic damage. So here we have, after the disease onset, the reduction of leaf area index, and so the reduction in above ground biomass, and obviously also on yield. And finally, the effect of the agromanagement simulated by the component agromanagement disease. And here we have a chemical treatment on the disease, which has a direct effect on the disease progress. We can see here the treatment and the difference between the potential, the biomass production with and without this treatment. And then it also calculates the decay of the agrochemical as a function of meteorological variables. Finally, the last component I want to show you is the one for simulating the abiotic damages. Abiotic damage implements several approaches for the simulation of abiotic damages affecting the crop. The models currently implemented belong to 6 categories. I mean, we have some approaches for simulating these damages, but the library can be extended with approaches implemented by us or by other research groups. And so we have lodging, which assumes that the most important parameter for calculating the lodging is the wind-induced moment, bending moment at the base of the stems. Then we have frost, cold sterility, and heat sterility, and we will see better in the following slides how they work. We have an approach for calculating the damage due to ozone, and it is basically based on the computation of leaf aerodynamic resistance, and so and also of the boundary layer resistance in order to have an average leaf conductance and calculate the flux of ozone through the leaf, and so the reduction of the photosynthesis due to this flux. And then salinity, which at the moment implements 2 different approaches for calculating the salinity stress on crop growth. One is based on the plant conductance at different layers within the crop. And the second one calculates the reduction of the partitioning of nutrients to leaves due to the salinity stress at the root level. And please note that in many cases, not in all, okay, not in all cases, but the driving variables of these models are the same of those normally used in crop models. They just drive different processes. And so if you build a modeling solution with a crop model and with abiotic damages, for example, maybe you do not need any additional input. You can just simulate both the systems, the combination of the processes without the need of new parameters. And note again that this component is operational but under ongoing development, and we participate these years to an European founded project named Mod Extreme, which is meant to extend this library in order to simulate the effect of extreme events on crop growth and development. So, cold sterility, one of the possibilities for simulating it. Please note that spikelet fertility is an important component of yield, which is really sensitive to temperature. And an accurate prediction of spikelet sterility means an accurate prediction of grain yield in many cases. And in cool climates, severe yield losses occur when the spikelet sterility is induced by cold temperature during reproductive growth of the plant. So one of the models implemented is based on hourly stresses based on a sterility threshold in temperature, which are summed to calculate a daily stress due to cold. And the different sensitivity of the plant to the sterility, to the cold sterility, in the period between panicle initiation and heading is accounted for in this case. And so once we have the daily sterility factor, this sterility factor can be multiplied by the percentage of photosynthase partitioned to storage organs, and then have a reduction on yield. And here we can see the outputs of the aggregated outputs of simulation performed by JRC. This is taken from an official bulletin, rice bulletin of the crop monitoring system on the European countries. And we can see that in specific years, specific conditions, particular zones, spikelet sterility due to cold air eruption can reduce the yield even by the 20%. And then we also can have heat sterility, not only cold sterility. And this is typical of tropical and subtropical environments where high temperature may have a dramatic effect on harvest index. And the models currently implemented in abiotic damages for calculating heat sterility are derived by two different approaches. The first one is by Chelinor, which calculates critical temperature, flowering distribution, and so on, to have a reduction, a direct reduction of the harvest index. And the second one, which is really similar to the one I presented for cold sterility, so with a reduction of the partitioning to the storage organs. And here we have the results of a sample simulation in Senegal, 2002. We can see that yield losses due to heat stress can exceed the 50% in some areas of the country. Then the last model I will present is the frost damage, as it is implemented in AbioticDamage. And this model evaluates the crown temperature, hardening and dehardening indexes, the killing temperature, again, a reduction of leaf area index due to frost, and possibly the crop death by frost. Here, on the top left of the slide, we can see the impact of two frost events in wheat growth. And we can see how the leaf area index can be reduced. And so, at the same time, a reduction in assimilation, and so a reduction in above ground biomass. And here again, the result of a spatial distributed simulation. And again, we can see that the damage due to frost can be really high. And so why not accounting for these damages while simulating the crops in order to have an idea of the yields, of the final yields?
What happened to the nexus spike?
To them?
There's a nexus spike in LMR. It's
Yep.
still alive?
Yeah, it is alive, actually. It has a strong reduction in leaf area index, almost to 0. And then here the conditions are favorable for crop growth. It starts to produce new leaf area index, and again, this is okay, a new event of frost.
What happened to the old leaves?
To the leaves?
Yes.
Okay, in reality or in the model?
Both.
Okay, the leaves die.
They die.
They die and they can fall depending on the crop. And in the model, you have a variable describing the amount of leaves which are alive and the amount of leaves which are dead. And so they are, there is a memory of how much leaf area index died after this event of frost.
So not all the leaves has emerged then in that case, because it went to 0.
Yeah.
And there is no leaf, of course.
Okay, almost 0. This is probably a real severe frost. Okay, imagine this is not really 0, or imagine this is 0. You can have remobilization of the resources to produce new leaves, and again to.
Is that in the model?
Yeah. Okay. Not directly. I mean, there are the approaches for translocation, and they can be simply added in this system. You can write a number of strategies for this remobilization of the resources, and then you can simulate your crop with one of these approaches.
Remobilization to the other parts of the plants, or it's,
for example,
I know remobilization to the economic component.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What I know of this, what we've seen in Russia, is that it's usually simulated as a fraction of the plants which really die.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only the plants which are living that can recover from it.
I think, okay, I know you have some expertise on these damages, and I think the implemented approaches are quite different. I'm from the one actually at the moment implemented in AbioticDamage.
Yeah,
I mean, but
that's quite different. Yeah.
if you want, you can write your,
Of course, yeah.
and we can add to this library. So I think the potential of this component is not just the model implemented in it, but the technology which allows this kind of reuse of other models and inclusion of other models.
Because this was one done with this Ritchie model, which is inside the.
Yeah.
Because that one also assumes a kind of fixed maximum frost tolerance, isn't it?
And you can show that probably there is some problem in parameterization issue in this hardening and dehardening index, and we have a huge impact of frost in southern countries, Mediterranean countries, and this is due not to the lower temperature in this country, but to probably a non-correct calculation of the hardening index, and so a higher impact of frost. Okay, so let's keep on, and we can, after this long introduction, we can finally see how these components are put together, are combined in order to produce modeling solutions which are customized for the specific context and used for simulate within yield forecasting systems. First, the role of the modeling solution. This is a typical flow chart of the processes leading to the estimation of yield. And we can see that modeling solution is a fundamental component, since its outputs, once aggregated at regional or national level, are related to historical yield data series in order to produce these multiple regressions or scenario analysis. That multiple regression that can be used at different times during the crop cycle to predict the final yields. And depending on the characteristics of the cropping system, these modeling solutions can be customized with the combination of one or more crop models, a soil water model if needed, biotic, abiotic damages, and so on. And all of this is done to reduce, in order to reduce the uncertainty in the simulation through the definition of modeling solutions suitable for the specific condition explored. Okay, this is the experience we have done as a group in crop yield forecasting. These are not operational, these are just exploratory studies. And as you may see, each modeling solution is different for each context. And as you may notice, rice is the crop we are focused on, but we also worked with, we have some experience with winter wheat and sugarcane in the state of Sao Paulo, Brazil, but we are extending this solution for simulating the sugarcane cropping system on the whole Brazil. And some of these experience comes from founded projects like the eAgri, or some other from non-founded projects. And I think one interesting prototype is the one we are developing for a rice forecasting system in the Lombardy region of Italy, which is, okay, a small region, but for the first time we are trying to predict not only quantitative aspects of the production, but also some qualitative aspects. And we will see in the next slide how. So, first, I would like to show you the possible differences of simulating potential production and the effect of water limitation on crop growth and development in these yield forecasting systems. First of all, potential production, which is the one dependent only on temperature, usually temperature and solar radiation, is almost always simulated within yield forecasting systems. However, the correlation between this production level and actual yields can be poor, for example, in case the fields are rain-fed or not fully irrigated. And this fact often undermines the ability of the forecasting systems based on potential production to catch interannual variability of yields and to predict yields at the end of the seasons. We have a couple of examples, one for sugarcane in the state of Sao Paulo and one in Morocco for the simulation of winter wheat. So in this case, remember, Brazil is the first producer in the world of sugarcane, and the state of Sao Paulo in this context contributes for more than half of the national production. In this situation, the crop is rain-fed because it senses optimal conditions during growth, because this particular state is characterized by high precipitation level during the boom phase, which is the phase of development where the highest amount of water are requested by the crop, and the dry season during ripening, which favors both yield formation and also harvest operations. In this state, there are two main managements, one of 12 and one of 18 months of sugarcane, and just one main cultivar, which alone covers more than a quarter of the sugarcane cropped area. And so in this situation, the question is, do we really need to simulate the impact of water stress? I mean, it is known that in this region there are optimal conditions, and this is why they do not irrigate the crop. And so one can think, I don't need to simulate water stress, I just need potential production. But let's see some results. Because to answer to this question, we prepared the modeling solution made up by the sugarcane model CaneGrow, used to simulate both the management and the potential and water-limited production levels. And we coupled it with a soil-water component used to reproduce the water redistribution within soil. And in this case, we decided to implement a tipping bucket approach for soil-water redistribution, which implies that water can move only downwards in the soil profile, filling up the layers until the fill capacity is reached. And then water overcoming this threshold will move to the deeper layer. And this kind of approach, okay, is less physically based than more complex approaches, but it is usually preferred in this kind of large area simulations because of the less computational costs, but also because of the coherency with the input data available in such large area databases. And so the first thing we can notice is that there is a huge difference between simulated potential production level and water-limited production levels, with the actual yields, which is somewhere in this range. We don't know exactly where. But also, we can notice that there is a different response, so a different interannual variability between potential production and water-limited production. For example, in these two particular years, 1996 and 2010, we can see that water-limited production are among the highest production in the whole time series, whereas in potential condition, they are almost the less productive these years. And this is due to the highest amount of precipitation in these two particular years, where probably the radiation were not so much as in other years. 1996, yes, and 2010.
Before El Nino. Before El Nino. 97 and 98.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Because basically, that is South America during El Nino. It's basically wet today.
Okay.
Compared to the Philippines, for example.
Yeah.
It's dry. And then 98 is La Nina. That's why La Nina is dry. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah.
Oh, wow, interesting. We didn't think about the effect of El Nino and La Nina. However, we have different response, and so the question is, which is more correlated with actual yields, with the potential production level or the water-limited production level? And to answer to this question, we perform different tests and different multiple regressions using indicators coming from potential production and water-limited production. And we also test some agrometeorological indexes. For each test, a maximum of 4 indicators was used in the regressions. And we saw that indicators of potential production could explain just a small amount of the interannual variability. We have a R² between official yields and simulated yields after the regression of the spanning from the 5 to 9%. So not a good result. Indicators coming from water-limited production could explain a larger amount of interannual variability. But actually, the best indicators were those coming directly from agrometeorological indexes, so no simulation behind this one. And however, the best combination, if you can put together all these indicators and choose 4 of them, the best set of indicators was composed both by water-limited indicators and agrometeorological indices, and it could explain more than the 80% of the interannual variability with an average error of 2.9 tons per hectare, which is not so much if you think that sugarcane can produce 60, 70 tons per hectare each year, each cycle. And note that no trend was detected in official statistics, so these results are only due to the goodness of the indicators we use for the multiple regressions. So in this case, simulating just potential level, even if the rainfall should be enough for the optimal conditions for the crop. So simulating only potential condition is quite useless. And the effect of water limitation is not negligible. Then we have a second case, the water stress in Morocco on wheat, where wheat is a staple food, even if the country presents suboptimal agrometeorological conditions for its growing. The major constraint, obviously, is drought in this case, which usually occurs during the emergence phase and during the grain filling. And the combination of these two periods of drought can reduce the yield up to the 85%. And so, in this country, the crop is mainly not irrigated, and rain is the only water source. And this affects the crop growth. Obviously, there are also other stressors. The main ones are the Asian fly pest and the yellow and brown rust, which are fungal pathogens. And all these factors contribute to have a marked season-to-season fluctuation in wheat yields, both at regional and national levels. Here we can see the outputs of the simulation. Here we have above-ground biomass, which is a variable usually well correlated with final yields. And here we have the one we simulated in potential conditions. We first calibrated the model in order to reproduce the behavior of the most cropped cultivar in Morocco. We used field data coming from Morocco and covering most of the cropped cultivar. And then we also defined some automatic rules for determining as accurately as possible the period of sowing in the different regions. But however, these are the outputs, the official yields and the estimated yields with this system. And we can see that we have not a good correlation, and some years where the estimated yields are completely wrong. This kind of estimation is useless. And then we simulated water stress, so the effect of water limitation, and a strong north-south gradient was highlighted in this simulation, and this was expected, obviously, because of the different pattern of precipitation in Morocco, but it was not simulated in potential conditions. And so once we had the simulation of water limitation, we see that the performance of the forecasting system are almost doubled. And in this case, we also added the simulation of diseases of these rusts, but it didn't increase the performance of the system. So probably
I'm curious of 2006.
2006?
Yes.
Why?
It is potential, but then it is low. Maybe observed as high, and then when it is water limited, it became high.
Yeah. Okay. This is actually, you're right. This is a strange behavior, but remember, these are not directly the outputs of the simulation, but the result of a multiple regression of the outputs with the official yields. And then, so basically, we take some indicators from the simulation and we relate them with the official yields. And then what we do to test the set of indicators chosen, we perform a cross-validation, a leave one out cross-validation. So we leave. You
leave 2006?
Yeah. And we use.
Forecast.
Yeah. exactly. We leave 2006 and we forecast it with the other years. And these are the results. And this probably explains this behavior. So let's have a look to the result of the combined simulation of biotic and abiotic damages on crop growth and development. And here, in several production systems, for example, in developing countries, the impact of biotic and abiotic stressors plays a key role in determining actual production levels. However, few forecasting systems couple plant models with models simulating these stressors. And we observed in our tests a general improvement of field predictions while simulating their impact on crop growth, obviously in those systems where biotic or abiotic damages are common. We have some examples, 3 examples on rice, both in African and Asian conditions, and 1 on winter wheat in the Chinese province of Hebei. So the first example is rice in Senegal. Rice is a staple food in Senegal, and there is an increasing demand and demand of rice, and also an increasing production since 2008 after the food crisis. And it is basically grown in 2 different areas of the country. In the north, where it is intensively grown, and the amount of precipitation during the crop cycle is less than 400 millimeters, but the crop is usually fully irrigated. And there is no irrigation in the south. Well, the amount of the precipitation is enough to satisfy the crop demand. But also, in this country, there is a high impact of biotic stressors like blast and Helminthosporium diseases, and also the occurrence of heat sterility. So these are the results from the simulation of potential production, and it seems to work quite well. We have R² values of 0.86, but you have to note that the trend alone in this case explains the 68% of interannual variability. And you can also note that by the output of the simulation, yield losses due to blast and Helminthosporium and also heat sterility can have a major impact on final yields. So once we simulate these processes and we see the effect on crop growth, we obtain this result with actual production with a R² near the optimum. And in this case, the selected indicators were the number of infections of blast, the number of infection of Helminthosporium, and leaf area index and yield reduced by the effect of blast. Similar situation in Sierra Leone. Again, here rice covers the 85% of arable lands, so it is quite important for that country. And this crop provides the 50% of the calories consumed each day by each person. And there is an alarming situation in terms of hunger. And we also have a yield gap due to blast, which ranges usually from 3 to 15%, and in particular years can reach up the 80%. And so these are the results when simulating potential conditions and diseases condition. And we can note an improvement in some specific years, especially in some specific years, probably, where the blast is more important. Last example of blast disease. This time we are in China, the Jiangsu province, and we have the simulation of potential above-ground biomass. In this case, obviously, we simulate not only potential above-ground biomass, we simulate a number of variables. I just show you this one because it's quite important for yield forecasting. And one can think that 0.87 is a good result. Yeah, it is good, but it is better once we simulate the diseases. We reach 0.92, and again, in particular years, the official and simulated yields are much closer than in potential conditions. So let's stay in China, but move to a different crop. This time we are talking about wheat. The Chinese wheat area is a huge area, partly affected by the rust complex. So we have yellow rust and brown rust affecting leaves, and then black rust affecting stems. And actually, the most important in this context is the yellow one. And the average yield losses due to this rust complex spans from 20 to 30% and can exceed the 50% in particular conditions. And again, let's start from water-limited production. Quite good results. And best regressors as indicators, we have the potential total biomass, potential leaf array index, water-limited total biomass, and the soil water moisture in the rooted zone, which is a proxy for different processes affected by water shortage. Once we add the simulation of the diseases, we reach this result, with the best regressor being the leaf area index has reduced by brown rust, the yield again reduced by brown rust, and leaf area index and yield reduced by black rust. Okay, I told you that yellow rust is actually the most important and the most impactant. And this was an exploratory study in this Hebei province. And probably, okay, the effect of the simulation of disease improves the results. But probably we still have some problems of parameterization. And because being an exploratory study, we didn't simulate the effect of overwintering or oversummering of the spores. And so maybe in those cases, if we simulated it, the yellow rusted variables would have been the best regressor. I don't know. We should try. So we also have some experience in assimilating the remotely sensed data. Do I have?
I think it started a little bit later, so you have 10 minutes.
OK, thank you. I will finish in 10 minutes, because I think the most important factors and the most interesting for you were the biotic and abiotic damages. Someone of you asked me to. I don't see him. Oh, well. OK. So we have some experience in remote sense data assimilation. And you know that the spectral profile of canopies retrieved from remote sensing provides quantitative and qualitative data on the evolution of the biophysical variables referred to crop growth and development. And this represents a clear advantage with respect to conventional field service, as it offers the potential for monitoring crop conditions across heterogeneous environments and over large areas. And the integration of remotely sensed information into crop simulation is becoming a standard methodology to reduce the uncertainty of the model inputs. And this can be done in different ways. For example, by recalibrating your model in order to make it reproduce correctly the remotely sensed data, or just by forcing the variables of your model with the values retrieved from remote sensing. And this is actually what we are doing now, but we are also extending our forcing component in order to manage correctly, iteratively, recalibration of the models. We have, again, some examples. The first one is on rice, and probably you know that the detection of rice crop areas via remote sensing can be more effective than for other crops, given the peculiarity of the management of paddy rice. Because after the preparation of the field, flooding is usually applied before sowing or in Asian conditions before transplanting. And so it gives a particular spectral profile, and you can more precisely identify, for example, the sowing or the transplanting period. And you can feed your models with that sowing dates or transplanting dates, which are in some way measured from remote sensing. And in this case, we use remotely sensed data both for understanding the sowing window and directly as regressors in the forecasting system. And again, these results, we already saw them. We have already seen them. And we saw that there is a quite accuracy in prediction, but note that the model in this condition explains just the 7% of the interannual variability. And once we correct the sowing dates and we use the remotely sensed data as regressors, we have R-squared values near the optimum and comparable to the results we achieved with the simulation of both biotic and abiotic stressors in this condition in Senegal. Another experience of forcing, this time real forcing, with the updating of the state variable of the crop models with the remotely sensed data, refers to Jiangsu province, again rice, again a European funded project. We have our assimilation components, which assimilates the sowing dates and also calculates the leaf area index based on NDVI values. So we have, once we reach the NDVI maximum for a certain grid cell, it will force the value of and update the value of leaf area index with a function which was specifically parameterized for these conditions. And we have that in this case, that assimilating sowing dates and this leaf area index produces an improvement in yield in prediction capabilities. This situation is reproduced also in Morocco, again sowing dates and leaf area index assimilation, and we see an improvement of the performance with forcing regardless the decade, the day of the forecast. And here we can see that the forcing, the output with forcing are almost always nearer the official statistics than the output produced without forcing in the different days of prediction. We didn't work only on remote sensing. We also have some experience in proximal sensing. And in this case, I would like to show you a smart application we developed for the leaf area estimation. And as you know, leaf area index is a key variable for analyzing the interaction between plants and atmosphere to calculate the amount of radiation intercepted, and so the plant water requirements or the possibility of carbon sequestration by the canopy. But also, it can be used for assimilating exogenous information in simulation models and for forecasting purposes. And this is exactly the case the International Rice Research Institute is testing now with the integration of this smart application with advanced crop monitoring and forecasting system. And if you're interested in it, I can show you later how this app works. I think it is quite interesting that it works. We tested it, we published a couple of papers, and it works exactly like a septometer or other instruments for leaf area estimation. And the difference is just that you don't need a septometer, which can cost up to 10,000 euros. 10,000 euros. I don't know in won how much is it, but.
So how would you measure? From an ear or?
No, from the bottom of the canopy. You position your smartphone below the canopy, and then it starts the acquisition at this magic angle. It will shot a photo, and then it will recognize the canopy from the sky.
What about the weeds?
About weeds.
How about the weeds?
Weeds.
Yes.
It calculates the leaf area index of the canopy, regardless if they are rice or weeds. This is a common problem.
Everything is green. What is green is green. What is sky is sky. Yeah. What is weeds are weeds.
It's not so sophisticated. I can suggest some improvements. So multimodal simulation, maybe we can skip it. We don't have time. I just want to tell you that the different approaches implemented in different crop models to formalize the biophysical processes involved with crop growth and development could make a model more suitable than other under certain conditions. And so species, regions, or decade, not decade, of forecast. The scientific community is increasingly moving towards multimodal approaches also for crop yield prediction. We have, again, some experience, and we tested different factors. First, the moment where the forecasting event is triggered and the climate condition explored. And the question was, so which is the best model for crop yield prediction in this condition? The result is we don't know. It depends on both on the decade of the forecasting and on the condition explored. For example, we can see here we have two crop models, WOFOST and CropSys, and we can see in this particular region of Morocco, the situation and the performance is completely inverted between the two models in the two different decades. Same situation, Jiangsu province, we are talking about rice, and here we can also see that the improvement due to forcing are not constant within different models. We can see that WOFOST always increases the performance once you add forcing to it, whereas WORL sometimes is better with forcing both sowing and NDVI, sometimes just NDVI or just sowing. And then also that in this case, early forecasts are better performed by WOFOST than WORL, whereas late forecasts near the end of the season are best performing with WORL. So I will skip it, and I would like to talk to you about the yield quality prediction. So crop quality represents an aspect scarcely investigated in crop modeling, but it is a fundamental factor to assess market destination, economic and nutritional value of agricultural products. Superior grain quality has become a key target in most of developed rice-producing countries, where production levels are quite stable, alternative food supplies are available, and there are strict production standards. In this context, the possibility of including the simulation of quality aspect in a yield forecasting system can be crucial to preserve the competitiveness and sustainability of rice producers in many areas worldwide. And we are specifically thinking about the European condition in this case. Well, these conditions are true. So we have a component also for simulating the quality aspects of crop productions. At the moment, again, it is operational, but under ongoing development, we have approaches for simulating some rice quality parameters and also rapeseed quality parameters. And quality in these models is mainly estimated as a function of the meteorological conditions experienced by the crop during the ripening period. There are many aspects simulated by rice modeling solution, but we are focusing on head rice yield, which is an important milling parameter for quality. We are focusing on it because we have data, we have statistics about this variable. And so we are developing a prototype for Italy, Lombardy region, which covers the 22% alone of the European rice harvested area. And we are considering two different varieties, this head rice yield indicator as an output. And we have field data both for crop quantitative and qualitative aspects. We have enough data for model calibration. We have official statistics to relate the outputs with them. We are working on hourly time step integration within the simulation, and we also simulate the micrometeorology effects on the thermal vertical profile of the canopy. And so obviously we have some problems, like the major constraints are linked to the availability of these official statistics and the uncertainty linked to the semi-empirical modeling approaches implemented. But we have some encouraging results for the moment. So concluding, these are the most important things we saw. The reduction of the uncertainty achieved through the more realistic simulations produce more reliable yield forecasts. However, it is not possible to identify the modeling solution best performing in all the situations. But with a suitable technology, and we are suggesting Bioma, but it's not mandatory to use it, it is possible to customize the modeling solution coherently with the simulated cropping system. And finally, a question for you again, as my colleague told yesterday, at the JLC they do not use forecasting weather. We do not do it also, neither. And so, how much do you think that forecasting meteorological data can improve this midterm forecast with these kind of simulation systems? So, that's all.